So I had a few questions about your involvement with Eckankar, and I just wanted to hear first about how you first heard about Eckankar or got involved with their movement.
Well, the time then goes back to early 70s. And I was playing at a place called Assyria in Toronto. And I was walking into the place, and I saw what seemed to be a photo impression of someone that's very strong. And it was very striking, but I was carrying stuff in, so I didn't spend time hanging with it. So I did what my business required me to do inside the restaurant. And I came back out to find out a little bit more about what I saw, and then it was gone. So it was a very strong impression of someone called Rebizar Tars, who was supposedly Paul Twitchell's main guru, instructor, teacher, guide, whatever, master. And around or about that time, people were talking about Eckankar, so it was an item.
Yeah, and then, so what would you say drew you into the Eckankar? So after you had your first initial experience?
Impression,
yeah.
Yeah, of the, let's say, the leader, right, coming through. It coincided with knowing a bunch of people who were at that time involved in not so much Eckankar, but the tradition it hails from, which is the Rouhani Satsang people, the Shabd Yogis. See? Around or about that time, I made contact with someone who was a master, a living master, called Kirpal Singh. See? And I coincidentally knew a lot of people who were in a circle, but I wasn't interested in him or his circle. I just felt the good energy from the people, and they were attracted to me because of my music. So my music's been a magnet for people from various religions and spiritual organizations who are particularly or especially sensitive to sound, music, and the spirit. So there was a convergence of forces and factors bringing me to an understanding of this process that is called Eckankar, the key to secret worlds. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They're not secret, they're built into everyone. So it's part of our universal makeup. We're multi-dimensional beings and extraterrestrial beings in a higher sense of the word, not just physically. Right? We share the universe with all beings. But we're designed to be more specific, and so we have our own sense of the universe. But we're really designed to embrace the whole universe itself, not just our particular flavor, but the universe of flavors. So that takes a while, it takes some evolving to do. Next question.
So then in terms of your more direct initiation with Eckankar, what was that process like, coming into their immediate presence and into the group?
Well, I went, I knew a lot of people who were into it, and then I finally said, okay, let me check out, let me see what's happening now. So I did hook up with some people who were involved. I had a very dear friend who was very aware of it and very involved, and she passed on. And others, in fact, the more I think about it, there were quite a number of people who were into it and curious about it, because it had to do with soul travel, as it was called at the time, right? And traveling through the soul agency to different universes or worlds as such, right? So it taught of a hierarchy of different dimensions and planes that were scientifically researched and mapped out in a certain way. So I wasn't that curious about that, but I was curious about the people and exactly what was happening. I seemed to have a vague connection, not a well-defined connection with them yet, but it became clearer to me that I was being pulled in, I was being processed. Through this initial sort of 1971 to 73 period of time where I had more contact with people involved in that. I started to realize that prior to that time, I had many dreams, like, for instance, in the military, of being visited by masters, spirits, guides, teachers, some known, some not known, and so on and so forth. So there was already a setup, but it wasn't clear to me what my relationship was to it yet. So in the course of things, I became more familiar with certain people, and I became more curious, more pulled in. So I managed to access their teachings, which I found to be very useful. But they were very comparable to what I understood from Kirpal's works. I didn't know the connection then, but Kirpal was Paul Twitchell's guru for 8 years in India. Something to that effect I heard of. And so a lot of what Paul was doing was what he learned and experienced and received from Kirpal. But Kirpal people never talked about it, and Paul's people didn't talk about it because apparently there were differences between the two, which often happens. When you are evolving, you sometimes evolve differently from other people. It depends on your background and your interests. So it was an interesting configuration. It was me, Kirpal, and people in Eck and Carr becoming interested in that, Paul Twitchell, and then all of a sudden I seemed to be getting closer in a certain way and talking to more people, and I wound up having a meeting with Darwin, who succeeded Paul. And he asked to meet me, and we met. So I made contact with Paul's teacher in the form of Rebazar, and then his living actual teacher in the form of Kirpal Singh. So there was a lot going on pulling me into that. And, so I did experience certain things when I was a little bit closer to Darwin, and the people that I would say had to exactly do with what Paul was teaching and writing about, and this process of inner worlds, right? And so Darwin acknowledged me as a master, like one of his people, and his secretary who knew Paul Twitchell, her name was Bernadine Berlin, also saw me as a master, and I was taken by surprise because I saw myself as a jazz musician, nobody, but I have a spiritual background in spiritualism and in Christianity and Buddhist interests. So there was a lot of things going on at that point. And so I had to follow what was more powerfully around me, and that was following Darwin. I think, as I realized, he needed my support in a certain way. So I didn't feel intimidated. I didn't feel there was a problem. It was a conversation about masters and everybody becoming masterful in their own right. So you had a question?
Yeah. And then so you spent about, you said about 12 years with the group there, with Eck and Carr.
And Darwin, mainly.
Oh yeah, sure. And then
he was the leader.
Okay.
He succeeded Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think I was connected to it probably around the time Paul was maybe just getting ready to pass over, early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My connection with Darwin was around, I think it was maybe around 83. So that's quite a time after.
Sure.
So 83 and then 86. And then 90, for the last time I played with him in 90. We played music together in Oklahoma. It was a very important thing that I participated in. And I was receiving even more support as being recognized as a master, but I wasn't interested in that exactly. But I was supportive of Darwin, and we spent some time together. So we knew each other, we corresponded. And apparently I was considered, as an adept of some sort. I knew the teachings, I knew the wisdom pretty naturally, and so I had intelligence that seemed to resonate with what they considered to be a higher level of consciousness. So I had the advantage of having a lot of spirituality behind me already, so I didn't feel I was eminently qualified or especially, gifted in any sense or whatever. But people found that I seemed to fill in certain spaces and certain gaps in terms of knowledge and knowing things. And I was always, as I still am, happy to inform people of the best of what I understand. I mean,
And then so throughout all of your involvement with Eckankar, what do you feel like you learned, or do you feel like it clarified anything for you?
I will say this, that there was an event where I can only say this, like you have what do they call it, an abduction. It was like I was abducted by the Masters, and I was taken up. Not against my wishes, because I kind of knew what was going on. I said, "Oh my goodness, man, I'm being lifted like in a ship." Awareness. And I wound up going to what they call the God worlds, where I had a certain very high recognition of things, and I was there. And the person who succeeded Darwin, Kemp, was there, right? And so it was an interesting thing. It was like. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was a far-out dream where I was in the company of their mastership or something. But it was powerful, very, very powerful, very sacred, very divine, very, very profound. Very profound, very humbling. And what it is about merging with love and teaching from that. And the version that I received of that in the higher worlds, so-called higher worlds of my own mind or their mind, Paul's mind, was kind of incomprehensible. So we're in the flesh, so we are covered over by a lot of things, but we're also not in the flesh and not covered over. So there's consistency with the intelligence and the wisdom of what that was or is in terms of loveness. And so that state is still here.